10-Minute Murder contains depictions of actual crimes. What you are about to hear is real and violent in nature. Discretion is advised. This is 10-Minute Murder.
Welcome to 10-Minute Murder, the brief and bingeable true crime podcast. I'm Joe, the host, and thank you for being here. And just so you are aware, right from the beginning, I'm basically allergic to the outside. I wasn't even out there for very long today, but just before I started talking to you just now, I sneezed about 47 times in a row. So during this episode, I may sound a little strange, a little bit off. Part of that is the sneezing and part of that is the Benadryl kicking in. But I'll edit out all the sniffs and sneezes so you don't have to hear that. By the way, if this is your first time listening, hi, I'm Weird, and welcome. Also, if you are new or aren't new to the podcast, either one, and if you are not subscribed, go ahead and do that now. Apple Podcasts just released an update to the app, so now if you want to subscribe, you have to click the little plus button at the top right. Apple changed some things up on me and didn't ask for my permission, so I'm not thrilled about that, but clicking the plus button subscribes you to 10-Minute Murder, and you won't miss any future episodes. Now, let's get to today's story. A killer with 4 victims. Maybe more. His method of murder is one that you've probably had nightmares about. Like so many killers before him, you'll hear how rough and tragic his life started, which led to a life of crime early on. His crimes progressively increased in severity until a chance meeting of a mom and her 2 girls on vacation. This is the Sunset Killer, Oba Chandler. Oba Chandler was the son of Oba Sr. and Margaret Johnson. He was raised in Cincinnati, Ohio, with 4 other siblings. He was born next to last. When Oba was 10 years old, in 1957, his father took his own life. He hanged himself in the basement of their family home. And to most boys that age, your father is your hero. And Oba's hero was suddenly gone. He was devastated. At the funeral, when the grave diggers were putting dirt on top of his father's casket, Oba jumped into the hole, not wanting his dad to be gone. Just a few years later, at age 14, Oba decided to start stealing cars. He was good at stealing them, but terrible at not getting caught. He was arrested 20 times as a juvenile. Growing into a mature adult, Oba didn't mellow into a responsible man, just the opposite. Only the severity of his crimes ramped way up. As an adult, he was charged with a variety of crimes, including possession of counterfeit money, loitering, burglary, kidnapping, and armed robbery. He was also accused of masturbating while peeping through a woman's window. In one incident, Oba and an accomplice broke into a home in Florida. They held the couple at gunpoint and robbed them. Chandler told his accomplice to tie the man up with speaker wire. He then took the woman into the bedroom, where he made her strip to her underwear. He then tied her up and used the barrel of his gun and rubbed it along her stomach. Clearly an act of perverted dominance. He went on to join the Marine Corps, but didn't last long before he deserted. People like Oba Chandler don't like being told what to do. Details about his time after are a little bit sketchy because he frequently used fake names and made up backstories. He was, though, an aluminum siding contractor with 8 children by 7 different women. By 1989, Oba was married and living in Tampa, Florida. He also owned a boat. That same year, Joan Rogers and her 2 daughters, 17-year-old Michelle and 14-year-old Christy, set off from their home in Wilshire, Ohio, bound for a dream vacation to Disney. After spending a few days having a great time, they got back on the road headed home. But Joan was lost. She was trying to get back to Ohio from Orlando, but instead of going north, she went west and was in Tampa. Deciding to just extend the vacation a little longer, she needed directions to a hotel. That's when they encountered Oba Chandler. He gave them directions, but also told them all about how beautiful the sunset is in Tampa, and the best way to see it is from the water. He happened to have a boat and sweet-talked the ladies into meeting up later to join him on a sunset cruise of Tampa Bay. They didn't rush out to meet Oba when the sun was setting, though. They took photographs from the balcony of their room as the sun was beginning to set, and then grabbed dinner at the hotel's restaurant about 7:30. By 9 p.m., they pulled up to the dock on the Courtney Campbell Causeway. Inside the car, Joan left a brochure with Oba Chandler's handwriting detailing directions of how to get there from their hotel. They boarded Oba's boat and set out on the cruise. Chandler had grown up in Ohio, the same state the Rogers had lived in, and he no doubt mentioned that during the small talk, gaining their trust. At some point during the trip, he tied the three up, sexually assaulted them, then tied a cinder block to a rope and one end around their neck. One by one, he tossed them overboard, still alive. Hands and feet bound, they weren't able to get free. Joan, Michelle, and Christy, all three either drowned or died from asphyxiation from the ropes around their necks. It took a few days for their bodies to be bloated and lifted them to the surface of the water. They were discovered by boaters out on the bay, pretty far apart from each other. They all still had a rope around their neck and were naked from the waist down and duct tape over their mouths. Michelle had managed to get one of her hands free before she drowned. Joan Rogers and her daughters were not identified until a week later, by which time Joan's husband, Hal Rogers, had reported them missing in Ohio. On June 8th, a housekeeper at the Days Inn said the Rogers family's room had not been disturbed and the beds had not been slept in. The manager contacted the police. Fingerprints found in the room were matched to the bodies, and final confirmation of their identities came from dental records. The Rogers' car was found at the boat dock by the causeway. For 3 years, police were unable to figure out who raped and killed Joan, Michelle, and Christy. Finally, a tip came in that a similar rape of a 24-year-old Canadian tourist had happened 2 weeks before the Rogers murders. They had a description of Oba because he had left that victim alive, probably because she had a friend waiting back at the dock. He also had promised her a sunset cruise on the bay before raping her. Police used the sketch and details of the cases in the media to see if anyone recognized the killer. They used a handwriting sample taken from the brochure in the Rogers car, printed out across a huge billboard in town. A former neighbor provided a copy of a work order with similar handwriting that led them to Chandler. Police also lifted a palm print from the brochure that matched Oba. By this time, Chandler, after seeing the billboards, sold his boat and moved his family up the state to Port Orange, near Daytona Beach. Police thought 2 suspects were involved in the murders, and a 1991 episode of Unsolved Mysteries aired where they discussed that theory. Obviously, that wasn't correct, but they also had a theory that the brother of Hal was the killer. They figured out that he was serving time for another rape somewhere else, so it couldn't be him. But they did find evidence that indicated that he raped Michelle in the past, but that was dropped because she didn't want to testify. And it turns out the whole reason for the girls' vacation to begin with was stemming from that incident. It had their small town talking, and they just wanted to get away for a little bit. On September 24th, 1992, Oba Chandler was arrested and charged with the murders. At trial, he said he was innocent. He admitted to meeting the Rogers and said that he had given them directions, but that was the last he saw of them. He also admitted that he was out on his boat fishing that same night, after being confronted with ship-to-shore phone call records during that time. Oba's own daughter testified that he talked about killing 3 women and was afraid to go back to Tampa. On November 4th, 1994, Oba Chandler was found guilty and sentenced to death. The jury forewoman said they need to do this swiftly. The man is a mutation of a human being and he needs to be destroyed. In other words, Oba Chandler is a monster. During the trial, he would sit and stare at the jury with a smirk on his face. While on death row, profiling experts speculated that Chandler may have killed previously, given his boldness and willingness to abduct 3 at one time. On November 15th, 2011, after a meal of 2 salami and mustard sandwiches, a half of PB&J washed down with coffee, Oba Chandler was executed by lethal injection. If you'll remember at the beginning of the episode, I said that he had killed at least 4, and so far I've only told you about 3. DNA evidence of a murder that happened in 1990 was linked to Oba Chandler. In 2014, investigators revealed that Ivelisse Barrios was raped and strangled in Coral Springs, Florida. It's believed that Oba stalked her for days, then slashed her tires on her car. He pretended to be a good Samaritan there to help, before abducting and killing her. That's today's 10-Minute Murder, the brief and bingeable true crime podcast. Thanks again for listening today, and remember, if you would like to submit a story for me to talk about here on 10-Minute Murder, you can email it to me, 10minutemurder@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening right now, and if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you can click the plus button in the top right corner. They just changed that recently. You click the plus button in the top right corner, and that will subscribe you to the podcast, and you won't miss another episode in the future. If you have any friends that are into brief true crime stories like this one, tell them about 10-Minute Murder. Thanks for listening. Have a good night.